How to get an apartment after a new job. First of all, congratulations, high five. Well, there are a few things to consider and I want to make sure you do it right, so let's get to it. It's Mastermind Mondays, where I share insider secrets and cutting-edge methods to help you master the rental game and level up. If you're new here, welcome. Thank you for coming and joining. Today we're going to talk about how to get an apartment after you get a new job. I know you're super stoked. You're like, woohoo, new job. So there are a few things you want to consider. So starting with the first tip, commute. I mean, you don't want to drive like forever to get to your new job because that'll really wear on you. It's going to be expensive as hell. And then aside from that, it's really going to drive down your job satisfaction. Because if you're going to your job after sitting in traffic or driving for like 45 minutes to an hour, try and cut that down to less than 30 minutes. If you can walk to work, that's the best. Because then you have your little bit of exercise and then you've got a really short commute, you're saving money. Bike to work if they can do that. And I love being productive. You don't want to spend unproductive time commuting because all that commuting time is going to eat away at your nerves. Then you're also dodging, speed cameras and tolls. If you have tolls, you have to cover those. Shit can happen. People can run into you, drunk drivers. I mean, that happened to me like last year. I was just driving and then some crazy chick was drunk and then she, crossed over the median, drove into me at like 60 miles an hour, put me in the hospital. If I was telecommuting, believe me, I wouldn't have that kind of problem. Because then I wouldn't have a car, wouldn't need to drive. Okay, but you get the idea is like the less time you spend on the road, the better. So when you're looking to relocate, you want to figure out, 30-minute and under radius for apartments where you want to look for, and then make sure that's going to be under your budget. Speaking of affordability is tip number 2. If you can be within 30 minutes of your job, that would be ideal. But what if there aren't any apartments within 30 minutes that you can afford? Well, obviously, then you're going to have to work concentric circles outward until you can find an area closest that you can travel to that you can actually afford. The first few years of my life when I started driving, I actually really enjoyed the commute. So I didn't even care. Like if I had to drive an hour, fine. Hour and a half, fine. I love being in a car because I just love driving. So I'm getting off track. But okay, coming back to affordability, you want to make sure you're going to be within a certain perimeter that you can afford. Now, assuming you've gone through and you've figured out where you want to live and you've also found your apartment, hopefully you used 36010x.com, and if you didn't, no big deal, I'm not mad at you. But if you use 36010x, awesome. Okay, so now you've got your place, you have to figure out what your utilities are. So you got to make sure you button that up. Okay, so gas, electric, phone, cable, whatever you're going to be using to hook yourself up with your new location. You got to make those phone calls, get that all set up, get it all connected, and then you're good to go. Because if you have an apartment, you signed a lease, and you have no utilities, you're SOL because like you're living in the dark and the cold. Usually a landlord won't let you sign a lease unless they know that you have already made some sort of arrangement with the utility company, and some will, actually they don't care. But okay, regardless, you really want to make sure you have utilities all hooked up, and so utilities are tip number 3. And so then tip number 4, I don't know, you have kids or you don't have kids, maybe if you have kids, that'll be your first consideration for perimeter, because you want to find a school location that's going to be like highly rated school. Also, we have a really cool feature. There are places you can live that have fewer sex offenders. And so if you are a sex offender, you can use that to find places where you can live which are not close to kids' parks and schools. If you are not a sex offender and you want to avoid sex offenders, then you definitely want to live within the areas that are designated on 36010x.com where sex offenders cannot walk or live. Oh yeah, and so then tip number 5, you want to get your priorities straight, because I actually don't know what is the most important thing to you. Maybe it's nightlife or maybe parks, right? And throw some frisbee around with your dog. So whatever it is that you're factoring, you want to consider all those things, and you can. You don't want to sign a lease and then you regret moving because then you're like, oh no, I'm in this 12-month lease and I hate it. Yeah, so like my whole goal is to preserve your happiness, and then make sure that it's on your punch list. If you don't know what a punch list is, it's not a list of people you can actually punch. That's not it. A punch list is like your to-do list of things that you gotta get done so that you can stay organized and on track with your life before you go to your grave. Then that would be your bucket list. And so then you have your punch list when you're, moderately young and healthy. And then when you're kind of ready to close down for the night, so to speak, then you start working on your bucket list. If this is really dark, don't worry, it gets better. So let's go to the next tip. Okay, so your next tip is food. Okay, so you have restaurants and grocery stores. If you like ethnic food, you're going to figure out where those ethnic foods are. If you want to have human interaction with people, you'll need to be social where people gather, such as bars and parks and restaurants. Next tip, you got your new job, but you need to make sure you don't get killed when you come home. So you want to make sure you take a look at crime rates, because that's going to be pretty important. Those things happen in rough neighborhoods. People get robbed and killed. And so you don't want to be a statistic. And so check out ClearMap. That's a free statistical map that is provided by the state of Chicago. If you're living somewhere else, probably the local police or some municipality will have statistics to be able to share with you about the murder rate and robbery rate and vandalism rate, rape rate. There are lots of rates that cops and statisticians work together on to create reporting for people like you who are interested in survival. Next tip, as far as survival is concerned, if you are a conceal and carry kind of guy or girl, you might want to consider that, because if you have your CCW, then you'll need to know whether or not those things transfer and whether or not you can even take your guns, because you may not be able to. So you got to factor that in. And if you are the kind of person who is really scared of guns, consider not going to a state that permits the concealed carry. So factor in firearms, because that's a pretty big deal. All of your firearm related laws are going to be a strong consideration. All right, next tip. You will need to consider property taxes and income taxes, because at the end of the day, you want to keep the most of the money you're going to get from your cool new job. If the government's going to be taking a bunch of your money for taxes, well, that's going to be really put a damper on your goals to become rich and famous one day and just retire at like 45. So the point here is you want to consider the money that you're getting and then factor that against what you're going to be giving up, because maybe it's not a pay raise, it could be a pay reduction. So factor in what the property taxes are, what the income taxes are, what the sales taxes are. Some of the states, might have higher fuel costs and higher cigarette taxes and higher alcohol taxes. If you're not a cigarette and alcohol kind of person, you still have to consider all these things, because that will be a cost of living, and that is an adjustment, and that is a real thing, cost of living adjustment. And you can look that up, because it'll help you figure out if you are making a lateral move, an upwardly mobility move, or a shitty move. Now that I spilled my secrets, it is time to wrap up the video. Thank you so much for watching. And I would like for you to subscribe and tell your friends, and Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and all of that stuff, and just invite people over to participate and hang out with us and learn stuff and comment. Speaking of that, just if you wouldn't mind, click the like and then the subscribe, and also hit the bell so that you can be notified the next time we publish content, so you can be informed. Thank you so much for watching this video, and we will see you next time.